Welcome to this meeting of the Grafton Board of Registrars. Seeing that all members are in attendance and a quorum is present, this meeting is called to order. Today's date is 3/25 of 2025 and the time is 9 o'clock. Okay, so we'll jump right into the agenda. Item 1, vote on early in-person voting for May 2025 local election.
So I did a little research. It looks like in 2023 and 2024 for the local election, you didn't have in person. Usually it's a little bit more expensive than the number of people that attend. It will be my first election here, so I would also lean on your opinion, but it seems as if it's usually a big cost to the town for a small number of voters, and they do have the option to do the vote by mail.
Agreed.
Yeah, the cost was always a thing, right? And I think we had talked about this one of our previous meetings, like whatever the number was, but it was pretty high. I guess we've never really drilled down, and I think partially because we haven't really had in-person early at
Not
the
for
local.
the local.
So it's, you know,
Yeah.
now we're playing with, okay, at the primaries and other things, so,
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed it at the Democratic Town Committee, and you know, the expense isn't justifiable, really, especially considering what the town budget might be this year.
Right, so cons I have cost, necessity, considering, as you mentioned, in-person and early, mail-in and absentee. In the past, we've talked about the displacement of the gym because that's typically where habits or users of the gym are displaced for that week. The only pro that I thought about, especially for you perhaps, is a good practice for the new workers, whether it's new poll workers, and for you to kind of, as the town clerk, see how that goes. But I don't know that outweighs, you know what I mean? So I know you say, looking at it, like in the past, we have not thought it was cost effective.
I fully agree. It would be a great experience for me. I have been reaching out to the wardens and I plan to meet with them. We do have the training. I'm familiar with all of the equipment, and both Todd and Mike have been through it in the elections. And so Mike is going to take me to the facility and we're going to walk through.
Okay, so summing it up,
Well, even though if you did the in-person, it's not at the same location as the polling place, so.
right, just the mechanics of going through it, but you've experienced, you know, I mean, I've been against, I think it's not cost effective, I think all those things, but if, you know, I mean, does everyone feel,
Yeah, I
everyone
agree.
feel comfortable? All right, so.
So but we will have the mail-in.
Yes, of
Yep,
course we
and
will.
absentee.
Yes.
And absentee. Yeah.
Okay, do I have a motion regarding, let's see, what is our vote on in-person early voting for the May 2025 election? A motion to, I guess, to not hold early in-person voting for the May 20th, 2025 local election.
So,
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, all in favor of not holding early in-person voting for the May 2025 local election? All in favor of not?
Right.
Aye.
Okay, 4-0 on that one. Approve location for early in-person voting if necessary, so that's not necessary for us. I could probably let the select board know, even though I think they wait for us. If we don't give it to them, they don't weigh in on it, so it doesn't make a difference. So, but I'll let them know anyway. It doesn't matter.
Perfect. Thank you.
Actually, one of the members is here, so. Let's see. Okay, item 3. Discuss VRS computer terminal access policy and training for all registrars in a reference to 42 USC 15483. Actually, that reference, the better reference, and I apologize for that, is 52 USC 21083. That comes out of the National Voter Registration Act. It's literally the same text, but that's a better reference for it. And so the only reason that I asked this be put on the agenda, because in 52 USC 21083 and in this mentioned, point 5 under A, B, A, and in general says any election official in the state, including any local election official, may obtain immediate electronic access to the information contained in the computerized list. So for our purposes, I believe the computerized list we refer to as VRIS. That's the system, right? So there is a federal law that talks about it. I guess I'm just trying to clear up any confusion this board has or the members have about where our legal standing is to do the things that we can do as registrars. So I only bring it up, and a lot of these are just to get clarification that there are laws on the books. Unlike some other boards and committees, we have laws that dictate what we can do, what we can't do for some of this stuff.
So can I make a comment on that?
Sure.
So the list is generally an extract because you can't on the system immediately generate a list of the voters. You could pull voters up individually on the program, but the list is the extract and I can provide that for you at any time. They do those twice a day at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. I think you're all familiar with that, but anytime you want that, I can give you that list.
Sure. I think so.
That's great, and I've asked for it. I guess my question, Madam Clerk, is and I had this further down, I think, but and we can wait. But if we can just touch on it now. Previously, my requests were fulfilled pretty much same day or certainly the next day. My last request that I made was considered or came back to me as a public records request. So I'm trying to I'm just for clarification from your office, how do you want them as public records requests, and are they being treated as public records requests, or is it more in line with the law that says, yeah, no, they have a right to that, you got to get it to them? So I'm just curious.
Yep, you can have it. I will keep a list of what I provided just because
Sure.
that's, I'm the keeper of the records and that would be a record that I shared. So, but you can reach out to me. You don't have to do it through a public record, but I will keep a record.
And I don't have an issue filling out the form every time.
You don't
Then
have to.
But then it becomes that question, and Mike and I talk about this. It's that 10-day wait period, which is actually more than 10 days because it's business days, and then it turns into, you know what I mean? And there's probably no urgency.
You can communicate what you want with
Okay.
me, but I will keep a list of what I.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. That's very helpful. Okay, so any further discussion on that point?
Nope.
Just pointing out the federal law. Now, as everyone understands, right, we can request them through the clerk's office if you're interested in getting the voter roll. Regards to training.
Would you need time? Excuse me.
Sure.
Would you need time to prepare that, or?
If you wanted the list, I would have to do a request as an extract. I think, are you all familiar with the Excel list? So how it comes to me is a text file, and I can request it, like a complete extract of all the voters, but I have to request it from the state, and the state fulfills that at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. for all cities and towns. And so when I get that text file, I'll put it on I'll transfer it to Excel, and then I can give you that
Yeah,
document.
I just wanted to kind of get a sense of.
Yeah, the
how long
system
it
is
takes, but-
old and very wonky. They're coming up with a new revised version in the
Yeah.
summer, but it's very old school.
Yeah.
And it's not very user friendly. So the text file being converted to Excel is so much easier to work with.
Sure. Okay. Great. Thank you.
It sounds as though, so that's a substitute for us going in there. The past clerk didn't want us in that office whatsoever. Is that something that you foresee happening? Like, this is the substitute. We're not going to actually be trained on the system or actually, you know what I mean? Like,
Well, I think maybe when you and I met and when Lisa and I met, we touched on the fact that the new system is going to be more user friendly and it wouldn't be as easy to delete people. It's going to be a lot easier to retrieve the data that you want. We'll be able to, from my understanding, because the new program hasn't been rolled out, that we can get our extracts in real time. So it might be different once the new program comes out. But right now, it's a lot of rigmarole to use that system, so I would rather just wait till we have the new one.
okay. The new system, will there be a read-only file? Do you know? Right.
Yes.
So you and I.
There's tiers of it.
Okay.
Right now, if I were to accidentally put my wrong password in, I have to call the state, and it takes hours to reset. It's just not a very user-friendly system, and I think it would just be better in June. I'll have the ability to reset. And if you were working on it on mine and locked me out on accident, I just feel it like it would be a wise choice to wait till the new system was out. There'll be training available in June, so I don't.
Training for, you know what I mean? Do you feel at this point you could say, yeah, training for all the registrars and your staff?
I can't speak to that because
Okay.
the system isn't out. It's been bumped back. I think the state right now is trying to
Anytime.
wait till everybody's local election is over because they didn't want to start a new system right before the big election year
Sure.
last year.
Sure.
So I haven't been trained on it. Everything I know is just by, conferences and stuff.
Staff in that office outside of you has access to VRIS.
That is correct.
So, right.
Well, Todd and Mike.
Okay. So they'll be certainly going through training.
Yes.
And
they
so
will.
the hope would be, I know personally from my perspective, I would like to be included if that's, and that might have to be whether we go through the state and say, hey, can these people get passworded to do it? I'm assuming that, but.
So I just feel like that has to be a discussion that we bump till the new system is out
Yep,
there.
no, I get that. Yep, I'm in no rush. Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Let's see. So now, so any further discussion on the federal piece or our training or access policy? Nope. Okay. Let's move on to 4. Discuss Mass General Law 51. So it's a series of Mass General Laws, 5122. I brought up 5122 because in 5122 it says registrars in cities and towns and towns may appoint assistant registrars. That would be all of us, and that would also be you, Madam Clerk. Yeah. Anyone in the office appointed as assistant registrars? Is Todd-
Actually, I'm not actually sure about that.
Okay.
I'm going to have to check.
All right, that'd be great.
I had a question about that. Who are assistant registrars?
Yeah.
You know, if it sounds like additional people could be
Right.
appointed.
Yes.
Because we're the board of registrars, so
Right. You can appoint an assistant.
I don't think I need one.
So there's the Connecticut registrars. They have a whole. It's very good. Some of the stuff I think I've mentioned it before. But so it goes through. I'm not interested in that necessarily either. But assistant registrars do have the same powers or seemingly close to according to this as registrars. So I kind of wanted to part of it was, is there anyone in the office now that's an assistant? And just to let us know if you wanted to. If you wanted an assistant, you can.
Well, I
could look at it.
apologize. I don't actually know. So I'm going to get
Yep.
the answer to that, and I will communicate that with everybody.
I mean, they're appointed for a term of 1 year, and so
Right.
I would think that their appointment would have to be showing up on the website if it's been.
It's a good question. I mean, I think we all agree we're wandering into
Well,
deep stuff or whatever.
the wordage here is may appoint.
Yep.
So
Right.
it
Yeah,
doesn't-
absolutely. It's not mandatory.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
So
right. And
being a small town, we don't probably need.
no, but for the purposes of the, you know what I mean? It's just like, so again, so staff in the office has access to VRIS. Is that because they're assistant registrars? You know what I mean? Or is that, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I hear you. I'm not interested in that, but I just
Yeah.
wanted a clarification. A lot of this is just clarification.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Any further discussion on 5122?
Nope.
Okay, move on to 5123. At the bottom, the city or town clerk, when a member of the Board of Registrars shall act as a clerk thereof and shall keep a full and accurate record of its proceedings and shall cause such notices as the registrars may require to be properly given. So really, we've talked about the town clerk being the clerk of the board. That's that law. That's what it says in that law. Would you agree?
Yes. So you can appoint me to be the clerk now, and then we can have that in the minutes.
Okay, great.
I motion to have Amy Berry be our clerk.
Clerk of the Board of Registrars, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Amy.
You are our clerk of the board.
Thank you.
4-0 on that.
Well, let's do 3-1.
Oh,
I'll
okay,
abstain.
sorry.
Abstains,
Yep.
yeah.
Any further discussion on that one? 5123. Okay, moving on. 5133. Any registrar may receive affidavits of registration, but all the actions of one registrar shall be subject to the review and acceptance by the board. I put this in here. I don't really know that we've ever had the opportunity to, as a board, review and accept any affidavits. So they're talking about people that register. I'm not asking that personally, I'm not thinking that that's something I necessarily want to do, but it is in the law. And we would have the opportunity, according to this, to review anything that's done from the clerk's office, as in Miss Berry's capacity as a registrar.
Additionally, didn't you do a drive for?
Yes.
voter- So that would be considered under this as well.
Okay.
And if you have questions about
Right.
like a voter registration, I would be happy to go through the form with you. I would show you the process of how I input it. I'm happy to
That's
show
great.
you it all.
Yep, Lisa and I, we've we got to see it firsthand last year. It might be a good idea we go back, but so I'm familiar with it, and I know Lisa saw it too. So, okay. Any further discussion on 5133? Okay. Moving on to 5137. So this has to do with the census, which the town census, which again, that's under our purview, somewhat. My question registrar shall enter the annual registrar every name contained in the list prepared by and under section 4, which they can identify as that of a person whose name was born on the voting list of the city or town at the last preceding election, right? So this is just talking about people that fill out the census. We take a look at that list, or certainly at this point the clerk's office does, given the residence of such person January 1st of the year, right? So they shall make all inquiries. So this is the part that is important, I think. Meaning the registrar, shall make all inquiries and investigations necessary to identify such persons as they shall not enter in the annual register the name of persons objected to by any registrar. So I know for me, it's just like the voter integrity piece. It's just like, we can object. You can object to people being put on a list that we feel shouldn't be on a list as registrars. How we convey that to the town clerk, whether she wants to, however she'd like to do that. But I just, again, this is us understanding the law and what the law says regarding our duties and what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. So.
I guess the intent of this would be really to look at how we work with the clerk to,
Sure.
oversee the process. That's, I think, what your issue is.
You and I disagree. You think we're an oversight. I think this law mandates us as an acting body, not an oversight necessarily. It's what we've been done, and I'm comfortable with it for the most part.
But we're working with the town clerk's office, and who's a member of the board of registrars.
Correct.
And together we identify, what the issues are.
I know you say together, but we really haven't done it together.
Well,
Some of it at this level, right? But I agree with you. I agree with you.
Well, because we don't get a list of who's being registered,
Correct.
so we can't object to anything because we don't see the list. So therefore, we just assume that the clerk has done all the identifying and
Right.
investigating and approves it,
So
and that
that's-
everything's okay. So unless there was a specific person that we became aware of that we knew something about, that we questioned whether they should be approved or not, we wouldn't.
Would it
We
make
wouldn't
you
be
feel
involved.
more comfortable if I told you how I do the census?
If you'd like to tell, sure.
So I contacted when I started mass mailers to confirm that it went out, and so it is coming back. There's many census forms in the office. So I divide them in 3 sections. 1, no changes and signed by the head of household. Those are scanned and updated as received. There's another section of minor changes. So if you changed your occupation, that is a simple change. It doesn't touch your voter registration in any way, but we go in and we'll update it as maybe retired, and then we'll update the census. Those are called minor changes. Then there are major changes, and that would be a family that maybe their child has moved out of the house and they signed on the bottom. And so if there's the signature of, say, the child that moved out, then they are removed from the census due to the wording, because the wording has been approved by the state to remove that voter. I save that portion of it with their voter registration card, because you have to keep those for 1 year. Then the rest of the family, if they're untouched on the census, is updated. Let's say that the mother or the father signed the child's name on the bottom. They are not removed. They were put into the inactive, and then a letter is sent out to the child that they need their signature. And then if we get that paperwork back, then they are removed. And oh, I forgot to mention, I moved them into a separate family code. So then the following year when the census goes out, they will receive their own census. It will not be on the parents anymore. And then I don't know if there's like another scenario, like if it comes back they moved and it's not signed, I go through the same process. New family code, inactive, and a letter.
So I guess that sounds great, and I think that that's the kind of thing that we really want to know, right? I mean, it's more about transparency than it is wanting to go in and do all this. I mean, I guess we felt, I know that you felt this way, Dan, and Lisa, you probably did too, that, we were kind of on the outside not knowing what the inside looked like. And yet we have all this responsibility to make sure that things go well. So if we don't have that information, then it's hard. But we don't need to go in there and do all that. That's my point. I mean,
But I want you to
have
know I'm open to meeting with you and talking with you and sharing with
Yeah.
you. So whatever your comfort level is,
Yeah.
I'm happy to.
That's the kind of thing I think.
And I hear you. At our own individual discretion. You know what I mean? As long as you, right, like you choose not to do it, that doesn't mean that one of us, anyone else on the board couldn't do it. It's our own individual discretion. That's what I would, like, and as long as you, like, I wouldn't want you to feel as though, hey, I'm going into the clerk's office. Well, wait a minute, we're not going in as a board. We don't have to. You know what I mean? That would be part of it. I'm not saying I'm going to do that. I'm just trying to get, so you understand. We're not acting as a board. I individually, as a registrar, can do these things. Much like we did for the sign up, right, when we went up to Crescent Street.
Yeah.
You weren't there. Lisa and I were there. So it's okay. We acted as individuals, let's say.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Well, that's fine. You were
Yeah.
trying to register people and all that, so that's not a problem. But I guess when it comes down to the functioning of the process, how much do we really, if we're working together, you could provide the information to help us feel comfortable with the process.
Of course, yes. Any information you want.
Yeah. Now, and then we wouldn't really have a need to, go in and do
You
that.
understand I'm just trying to make it clear
Yeah.
that what you think is a need to fulfill your role might be different than what I think is a need. But I want to, let's be clear. I want to work with the town
collaboration.
clerk.
Yeah.
Absolutely, as a registrar, when
Yep.
she has a registrar hat on.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're getting in those census forms now. You do them. Does everybody in the office do them?
Yes,
Okay.
Todd and Mike both do them.
Yep.
They have been doing, Todd did all of the no changes. I asked if I could do the ones that would be
Major
potential
change.
remove, just because I need to be familiar with the list.
Sure. Yeah. Then if the census isn't responded to, do we send out second notice?
In June, we send out a confirmation mailing.
So I think those two things are different, and I don't mean to put too fine a point on it, but they do talk about it's not mandatory that a second notice be sent out if they don't respond, which really I think is, so how they describe it is it's the same census notice that goes out, except you take out all the information, because the feeling is if they didn't return a first one, perhaps it ended up at a house that was now become vacant, or this, I believe that's what the mindset was. So there is a second form could go out. It's not mandatory by the state, but it is, it's a possibility. I'm curious if we do that, or I think what you're talking about is if there's no response by June 1st, a confirmation letter goes out to say it. And I think I'm right about that, right? And
Yes.
so
I've actually never done the second. It's kind of
the
costly.
second notice, right? No, understand. I completely understand. I'm just curious, as we go through it. It's
I don't
like,
know
okay.
if Grafton has done that. I don't know.
Understood.
I personally have never done that.
Gotcha. So it's that first census thing, and then the confirmation notice goes out if you don't get it back.
Correct.
And at that point, if if after the first notice, if it's not responded to, voters on that, are they made inactive at that point?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Great. All right. Any further discussion on 5137?
None.
Okay. Sorry, let's go on to 5412. So, time frame of election officer appointment. So the first line of 5412 says, the selectmen of every town shall annually, not earlier than July 15th or later than August 15th, appoint as election officers for each voting place. And then it goes through the election officers. Whether it's a clerk, whether it's a warden, so forth and so on. This was a question that, I'm trying to get clarification on as to why it is we're appointing people prior to July 15th when we're not in that 6-week window of appointments.
Well, we still have room for more election workers. The select board can appoint at any time, and as it comes closer, the time frame is outlined in here. Then if the select board hasn't done it, but if we waited till July 15th, the election would be over.
So you're talking about the local election.
Yes.
When you say the select board can appoint at any time, how does that square with the first sentence? The select of every town shall annually, not earlier than July 15th. How does that?
So these are just additional appointments. Like that would be the appointments that they would do for the year would be the July to the August appointment. But these requests came in later, so they wouldn't have been able to be on that July to August 15th appointment. These are new requests.
But it doesn't make the distinction. I'm curious if there's case law or if did town council weigh in on that?
I called the state
Okay.
and I talked to the state attorney, and she said that
Tassinari?
yes.
Could you provide me that guidance? Is it in writing?
Well,
Could you
it's not in writing. I just spoke with her verbally.
I understand but to me this is kind of like a big thing that I think is being ignored, and I'd be curious. That's not what the law says. So that's my curiosity of it. It's just like, and I guess part of me is so. We originally had Passover poll worker. I talked to you that night about, and I said, I'm trying to do this on behalf of you if you don't want me to do it, and you said go ahead. And then to see it show up 2 weeks later, I understand, but I don't understand it. This is like, despite the fact that I felt it was important that you weigh in, I also, in talking to the assistant town administrator, came across this law. No one's really addressed this specifically about that. I hear what you're saying.
So I'm not actually a lawyer.
Me neither.
So I
right?
feel as if you want
Yeah.
the correct answer, I can't. I
Okay.
don't want to misspeak. I just know I did reach out to the state.
Okay.
And I feel as if I don't want to misspeak.
Okay. So I'll reach out to the elections division maybe and see if they'll clarify it for me.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. You would agree too. So as we go through this, right, upon the Registrars procedure consideration. So one of the other things that I wanted to point out here for us is if the town committees submit a list of candidates for poll workers, that's going to be our board. So as it stands for those what I'm going to call one-off appointments, the town clerk sends a letter of recommendation to the select board. They vote on the candidates. For us, if town committees, whether Republican or Democratic town committees, submit a list of candidates, they haven't sent that list out yet, or as of last week they hadn't.
Were they notified?
No,
were.
They were.
Okay, so you think they've been notified? Because last I knew they had not been. So they did.
For the election workers?
Yes,
Oh, I don't actually know about that.
Yeah, I don't.
I know they were for the registrars.
For the board of
That decision's
registrars,
supposed to
yeah.
come this week from the town committee.
Yeah.
I think so that feeds right back into this piece where my understanding of the law is if a letter hasn't been sent out and if they haven't, town committees can initiate that letter. town committee can send a letter to the select board and say, hey, I have this list of people. I want these people considered to be poll worker
Sure,
candidates.
I understand that according
The
to this.
flip side of
but
that is,
I don't think anybody knows that.
I understand, right? And so, that's, you could,
Because it
great.
never came up in.
At your
in
meeting,
meetings.
talk to your chair and say, hey, you could have sent a letter out.
Yeah.
This law speaks about if the town committee hasn't sent a letter in, the town by April 15th is supposed to send out a letter saying, hey, if you have any people that you want to put on as a candidate for election worker, send it to us. Either way, when the town committee send in names, this board, the registrars, are the ones that consider the candidates. And so that's in this law too, and it talks about upon the filing of such list, the registrars shall forthwith proceed to the consideration thereof and shall on or before June 13th submit to the selectmen the names of persons whose names appear on the lists who in their opinion are qualified to act as election workers.
Election, but see, one thing that I notice is
Yeah.
they determine, there's a determination between election officer and election worker. So the officers to me are
I'm
Warren,
sorry, I missed.
Deputy Warren
Okay,
you know.
sure, let me see.
versus poll worker, which I think is different than the officers.
I think throughout this, you won't see poll worker in this. If you can, you know what I mean, you won't. I don't think you'll see it, but
Okay, yeah. they're
so
just-
I might have misread it. It says qualified as election officers. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
the election-
they state election officers are these,
Yeah.
and they don't mention poll workers in there.
I understand, and that's fair. I can ask for clarification, but because I believe they're talking about all officers, because they go through the lists of. So they talk about wardens, they talk about clerks, they talk about
Inspectors.
inspectors. They also talk about
Or are the poll workers considered,
tellers.
Tellers.
Yes, right. This was the question I had asked too of town administrators. It's like, look, because his feeling was, well, poll workers. Yeah, no, they're not saying poll workers in here. They're talking. They refer to them as election officers in all their capacities. So we can get a clarification on it. Even so, I guess your contention is that no, if the town committee submit a list of names, they're not. We would that who then in your mind is the one that. I don't want to say vets, but certainly makes the recommendation to appointment.
yeah, I guess that would be my question. Are we talking about these officers
Right.
for appointment versus the, maybe they're considered tellers as the poll workers?
I think they are.
So that's, yeah, that would be the what the difference between the
I don't
two.
know.
Madam Clerk?
Is that within your job description or for?
So, are you asking what their role would be at the election?
No, I think the confusion here is that the way this law is written, perhaps, that my contention is it's written to identify all poll workers. It's not spelled out as poll worker. They're
Right.
referred to as election
Official
officers.
officers.
And my thought is that's all that's everyone
Yes.
that works as a poll worker. If that's the case, if town committees submit those names, I read it as this board makes the determination as far as, in our opinion, who is qualified to act as an election officer.
So since I just feel like that's just something that needs to be clarified.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Would you agree, John?
Yeah, I would agree. But again, I think, we don't do this in a vacuum. We have to do it coordinated with the town clerk's office, who has the capacity to do this. We don't have the capacity to necessarily determine qualified,
Well, I mean, the town clerk can correct me, but I believe it was stated at a select board meeting that it's an automatic appointment. That was the policy of the town clerk, it was an automatic appointment.
but you have to review the qualification.
No,
So
we
they
do.
submit an application.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so, but that's a normal clerk's job to review that?
yes.
Have you in your past experience ever worked with the Board of Registrars to approve them?
I have not.
I know that, we have a role, but to what extent do we have that role?
And I'm suggesting it's clear in this law, upon the filing of such a list, registrars shall forthwith proceed to consideration thereof.
Yeah, but in
It's just-
collaboration with the clerk's office.
But she's a registrar, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In this capacity, right, so I think it's important that we understand the clerk has the registrar hat and the town
Yeah.
clerk hat.
Mhm.
In this case, they're talking about with Clerk Berry.
Right.
They're talking about with
Okay,
her.
all right. I just didn't want to.
I think it would just be wise to have it clarified.
Absolutely, I don't disagree. And a little bit further down, no person shall be appointed as an election officer until he's found qualified to act as such herein provided. Right, and so the issue that I see down the line is if the town clerk's office doesn't have a policy with regards to whether you want to call it a vetting process or some type of qualification look at, and we do as a board of registrars, there's an imbalance there. You know what I mean? And I'm not comfortable
Are
just
you
saying.
talking about the imbalance of the parties or of the
No.
who is appointing?
I'm talking, and if you said, you know what, I don't, as a clerk, when you put your town clerk's hat on, it doesn't matter to me. My policy is, yep, whoever applies, I appoint. But we say, well, if they apply through this method of town committees, we vet, we will take a look. We will meet and say, okay, candidate one, candidate two. I suspect that that's how we would do it, right? This is the ask: is should we create a policy for this board? Now it hasn't happened. It certainly hasn't happened in my 3 years that the town committees have submitted names. I don't suspect that it will, but it came up because the thought was, I know you didn't say it, but it was, yep, the town clerk's automatic appointment. Automatic recommendation, I should say, for the, you know what I mean? It's like,
Well,
okay.
you do some vetting. So.
Right, and I feel like the application submitted is the vetting.
Okay, so so I think we're talking about two different things, right? It's just, so the town clerk feels as though that is the vetting in the appointment process.
Mm-hmm.
Your question is, you do vetting, so I guess that would be the answer, Madam Town Clerk. Yeah.
Yeah. So
We might do something a little bit more extensive.
why?
We could certainly have, right, and so now we get back to this idea of a policy. Does this board want to use the policy that the town clerk uses, really, which is just vet the form?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's like, why would we do more than? I mean, as long as we're communicating, that's I think the issue that you're concerned about is that in order to have oversight, you know, I feel like we need to collaborate. And so as long as we have a process of collaboration, then we have oversight. We don't need to, you know, reinvent the wheel every time something new comes up if we work together.
And we don't really currently have the list. Like, we don't have a list.
Correct.
Yep.
No, I understand. I'm fearful that if a list is presented, and we don't know that because it hasn't been solicited or hasn't been, and it's not past the deadline.
But I would communicate with you.
And I understand, and so, but then the process becomes, okay, as a registrar, right, you have a list, and then the question just becomes for our board, whether we decide our process will be different than the town clerk's policy of, nope, that's enough. You know, I mean, I had an issue that came up previous, was like, is it a practice or is it a policy? Well, practice isn't policy, and so that gets, you know, it's searchable, runs people into problems, it runs boards into problems. No, that's not a policy, it's a practice. Well, and so, you know, I don't want to keep hammering away at it, but
Yeah.
to get back, right, so security, integrity of elections, polls handle sensitive information like voter list ballots. Background checks can help prevent individuals with a history of fraud or theft from tampering with the process. Voter confidence. Voters are more likely to trust electoral process if they know poll workers have been screened. This can increase voter turnout and participation. Public safety. Background checks can help identify individuals who may pose a threat to the safety of voters or fellow poll workers. This is especially important in situations where polling locations are in schools. Our polling locations are in schools. Voter intimidation. Voters should feel safe and welcome at polling locations. Background checks can help reduce the risk of intimidation tactics by ensuring poll workers have no history of violence or disorderly conduct. Deterrence. And this is, to me, I love deterrent. I'm a big deterrent. The very existence of background checks can deter individuals with malicious intent from applying to be poll workers. Again,
That's
when you
good.
talk about,
Yeah.
you know, this is some of the reasons why, you know,
Yeah.
we might look at it differently as a board. I'm not saying we will. I'm saying, you know, for future, you know, conversation of whether we really need to institute a policy based
Yeah.
on some of that stuff.
Well, I think that the thing to remember about all this is that these are guidelines. We're a board, including you. So we all work together, you know, but, you know, the information, you know, should be an agenda item so that we understand the process, how it's going, how many people you've recruited, you know, whether you ran into any problems, what's your process. That I think is what we should be doing.
I'm just trying to drill down on the difference between what the town clerk does compared to what this board does.
Well,
That's all.
she's part of this board.
I understand in the capacity of when she makes those recommendations on
Yeah.
her own,
Yeah,
right? So that's
Okay.
all I'm trying to
So-
do, John.
yeah.
One question, so you're saying background checks should be done for,
I'm saying that
it can be done if we wanted them to be done.
this board needs to determine that piece, right? That's all. I'm not saying it's a good idea. It's going to have to be a conversation about, hey, right? And so the town of Sterling, it took me all of 15 minutes to find 10 towns that do Corey checks. This came up because I talked to the assistant clerk, and he's like, what are we going to do? Corey check everybody? I guess it seemed outlandish to him, but it took me all of 15 minutes to find 10 towns. That's exactly what they do. They Corey check their poll workers, right? One of the reasons the town of Sterling does that is because their poll workers are in schools, right? And so the Corey check is, and again, this is a discussion.
Right.
This
Yeah,
isn't,
no, it's
right?
it's
If
fine.
this board said,
Yeah.
yeah, no, we don't want to go down that road, great,
Yeah.
right? But whether we have a policy or procedure in place, it came up because of all of this, you know, the clerk's appointments are different than the board's appointments. Do we have a policy? There was confusion about the clerk's policy. It's not really a policy, it's a
Right.
it's a procedure.
I think in the you know, I've only been on the board for what, a year and a
Yeah.
half, but yeah, the transparency is I think the issue. You know, it's like a mystery of what was happening in the clerk's office, and being new, I'd never seen this before. This would have been helpful to have in
Yeah.
the past. But you know, the key here is how do we work together in a transparent fashion and understand how this system works without, you know, handcuffing the clerk's office on, you know.
John, I don't
Right.
think you're we're not handcuffing the clerk. Unless you're saying that if this board, when we get appointments from town committees,
Yeah.
we're not slow rolling anything.
No, but if we get involved and they're involved, it wouldn't flow very well. If we go into the clerk's office and want to do all this stuff and, you know, it's like.
But, okay, so I'm unclear. I think you're off point. Like we'd have a meeting, right? Whether we'd call a board of registrars meeting and go, okay, this list
Yeah.
has been submitted by the town committees.
Mhm.
These are candidates for poll workers.
Yeah.
This is what we're talking about. Not going in, not this isn't verification or
No.
whatever. This is something separate.
Hmm.
And whether this board feels as though we should come up with a policy regarding vetting of poll workers. That's all we're talking about. We're not getting in the way. It would be, so the letters come in, I'll call a meeting immediately, or if you're the chair, you know, call a meeting immediately, and we can go through it.
Okay.
We're just thinking about it at this
Yeah.
point. We're not,
So the current policy is you don't do a Corey check on people?
No,
Yeah.
from my understanding, they don't. I hadn't done that in my previous town either.
I only use that as an example of what some other towns do. I'm not suggesting that we do it for our board necessarily.
Yeah.
It's a conversation.
I like the idea of looking at the policy to understand how it works, and the fact that the town committees have an opportunity to bring forth people, which I
Right.
don't think people knew. So,
Agreed.
So that's good. So there's a certain vetting
Absolutely.
process going on there too, and then, you know.
Yes.
So I think that, yeah. So I don't know. Together with the clerk's office, we can review the list, but you know, that's I think that would be.
We can't review those individual appointments. That's completely on the clerk and the select board. We can't review, right? Like, she may put forth a recommendation of people, which that happened 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
Two poll workers got appointed.
Yeah.
We had nothing to do with it. Why?
Right.
Because it was
So-
her appointment as a recommendation.
Okay.
When the town committees put names forward, that becomes our letter of recommendation. That's all I'm trying to say. And as a result of that, what does this board do, including the town clerk, who's a registrar? What does this board do with regards to any vetting that might take place? That's it again, when it's not on the agenda today, we're not, outside of this conversation really discuss. But it's just something to think about.
Okay.
Okay? All right. Okay, 5412. Any further discussion on 5412?
No.
None.
Okay. 5413. Such election officers shall be enrolled voters so as appointed equal represent. So this goes back to, this also came up, 5413. Such election officers shall be enrolled voters so appointed as equally to represent the two leading political parties. So there is a law that talks about trying to get equal representation of the political parties, the two leading parties, which in this case would be the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, right? So there is a law that talks about trying to do that. And as long as we're all clear on how we get it, so the goal of this law is to have people of different parties, whether it's at a check-in table or so that any type of election hijinks is hopefully avoided, but with a check and balance. We're very heavily, I think we're up to 75 poll workers, I think.
I think you're right.
So as a little sidebar, do you feel that that's going to be okay for the primaries?
Yes.
I know where, do you have a goal in mind with regards to the total number you would like to see? I mean, it could be added, you might be,
I don't really.
500.
No, that seems excessive, but I don't have a number for you.
Okay. But how we get around this checks and balance pieces with unenrolled, we're very heavily unenrolled. I understand it's necessary in order to have an election, really. Otherwise, you start to scale down the number of workers, and that would be handcuffing the town clerk, right? She's like, look, I have 15 poll workers. I can't do it.
Right.
The state talks about 6 poll workers per precinct.
Right.
We have 5. That's 30. Plus, down they do it in shifts, and ideally, I think they want to go to 3 shifts. I think that would be great, right? And so now you're talking about 30 times 3 is 90. So you would think a number that would, to start the thought of the best number of poll workers, it's
Right.
probably should start somewhere around 90.
Well, unfortunately, just even the demographics of the town isn't even Steven.
Right.
And unenrolled, I mean, most people are. So
Right.
it's just
70% of
have to-
Grafton.
And you can't force somebody to be a poll worker just because of their party affiliation.
I understand.
So you have to just follow the guidance of the state. And
Right.
you have to just work with what you have, and you have to make sure. And it sounds like in the past they have, and I will assure you I will do the same in the future.
I'm very confident of that. No doubt about it. It's just, again, so there is, this is something this board or certainly the town needs to be, keep in mind with regards to that piece. That's all. Anything further on 5413? Okay. 5414, primary elections, town clerk determines in writing there is a deficiency in the number of required election offices within 6 weeks. So this talks about the town clerk's ability to say 6 weeks prior to election. So in this case, the town election, 6 weeks prior, the town clerk can basically go to the select board and say, I don't have poll workers. She would put it in writing, determines in writing there is a deficiency, and at that point, the board doesn't have to pay attention to party affiliation. They can do whatever they want, and then 3 weeks prior to the election, it's all on the town clerk. She has the ability to appoint poll workers, even I believe out of state. I'm not sure about that, Madam Clerk, but I think out of state people that have registered, not even in the state. It's a wide open thing. So I think this speaks to, getting back to 5412 when we talk about, gee, what if we don't have enough workers? And you really shouldn't limit the that July 15th to July to August. No, this is why this is in there. So, I realize, arguably 6 weeks prior, maybe it's the thought is last minute, but you can add anyone you want onto those poll worker roles. It doesn't make a difference.
Yep.
So, that's part of that provision in there to say, hey, if we're really pressed for workers,
Sure.
it doesn't make it, now it's not, recommendation. At some point, the select board can appoint, and then 3 weeks, it's the town clerk automatic appointment. Doesn't make a difference.
Yep.
So that's how they address that in the law.
I think that was helpful during like the pandemic.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a current issue right now. I don't know that we'll be in that position. I feel like we do have quite a few poll workers, and I feel as if we are doing what we're supposed to do with the unenrolled. We have a lot of unenrolled.
Right.
So, I mean, it would be great if more Republicans were, signed up to, but they haven't yet.
I agree.
State.
Nope.
Yep.
Right. Would like to see the balance. I think now it's
Of
17 to
course.
3, and so it is a thing that it should be paid
But it's
attention
not,
to.
it's not coming from our
I understand that.
board or
Nope.
our office.
No, I agree, and I
Yep.
think it was brought up at one of the meetings. It's like, look, the group that's less underrepresented needs to do more to get those, right? And so, yes, is that it's almost like I've always not struggled, but it's just like, okay, the Board of Registrars should do voter registration drives. Well, can we? Sure. Should we? So I felt that same way about this other piece. It's just like, so is it completely hands off? Does this board have a role in trying to try to balance that out? I don't necessarily feel compelled. I do feel it's just like, yeah, no, let whether it's the town committees, let them get in there on that. But at some point, I think if the imbalance becomes, gee, that's really bad. I just don't know when we think that, whether it's intervention, much like the registrars intercede with voter drive. Is this something we also try to intercede, whether it's a letter to the whatever committee is behind, or it's like, hey, the lack of you putting poll workers in under your party affiliation is causing problems further down the line.
Well, I still need to check to see if the select board sent that.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that would answer one of our questions.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yep.
Yeah.
And
'cause
I would see this would apply if you had an RTC or a DTC that was not active.
Right.
So
Right.
there's no party that's going to even elicit poll workers, so therefore the town clerk may go forward
Right.
and send something, say, hey, we're looking for
Right.
members of either party.
Right. Whether that's a public announcement or
Right.
whether whether that happens when we are doing, whether it's poll worker drives or, again, it's, everything seems to run well. I've been doing, 3.5 years? I've really been stilled with great confidence as to how elections are run in this town. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I do believe it. It's just, now it's starting to drill down to due diligence as a board, and I'm not going to be here, so then it turns into what is us, at least the two of you that are going to at least move on at least a little bit into the future, as well as the town clerk.
you want to. I mean, this is great to have the
Yeah.
background
Thank you, Jeff.
understanding of, what the role is. So
Sure.
thank you for,
Yep.
for
Absolutely.
doing that.
No, but let's keep going. I'm sorry. Any further discussion on 5414?
No.
Okay, great. Let's see. 950 CMR. So it was always funny in my previous life when I was working, the CMRs as opposed to Mass General Laws, which is it's always a curious thing. But yep, there's another group of mass laws called CMRs. And so if you go to the second page, 57.03, who designation of coordinators. So, Madam Clerk, this question, I guess, was for you, really. Each city or town clerk shall designate a person as the local NVRA. So that's National Voter we talked about that. That's the national implementation coordinator. So would you happen to know who the NVRA implementation? I'm thinking it's you, but
I don't, but I
okay.
will find
All
out.
right, great, thanks. Who shall be a person in the clerk's office responsible for voter registration? So
I would assume that it is the
think
clerk,
it's probably you, but-
I mean,
I gotcha. Nope, it's fine. It's again, we're trying to drill down on stuff, and so if you go to the next page, registrar or voters must accept mail-in affidavits. I don't want to beat this to a dead horse, but registrars are thoroughly involved in law. They're thoroughly mentioned in the law. So registrars shall add the person's name, residential address. And again, we've all agreed as this board, Madam Clerk is a registrar, so fine, we're good there, right? Date of birth, party,
But
selection.
if,
Yep.
like we did the National Night Out,
Yes.
we did a voter registration.
Yes.
Drive there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
And again, this isn't necessarily drives. I don't want to confuse the two, right? This has everything to do with registration in and of itself, right? So whether it's through a drive or I think I'm pretty sure everyone's aware, right? So the Registry of Motor Vehicles submit names to the right. It's Mass Health submits names. There's another state agency, right? They've kind of made state agencies like this go-to when the people go and ask for help. They forward that stuff to the VRIS system, to the election system, and for me and some of the stuff that I've become aware of, it becomes a question of the verification of whether these folks are actually should be put on voter rolls. It seems to be the state kind of says, yep, let's move these people forward, put them on, and then it becomes, I think, unfairly on the clerk's office to try to determine whether this person actually belongs on a voter roll. It's
So what would be a criteria where you think that they wouldn't be?
certainly citizenship is a big one that comes up.
So they do have to prove that.
Well, I understand, the question becomes, how does that system work, right? So,
From my understanding with speaking with the state,
Yeah.
they have to provide documentation that they are a U.S. citizen, be it a birth certificate, be it, other I can't think of the documents off the top.
Passport.
Yep.
I hear what you're saying, but I know from the other side of it, right? Like, so the stuff I try to do outside of just the Registry of Motor Vehicles has not provided documentation. There is a lawsuit. The Registry of Motor Vehicles is not providing documentation how they determine that, right? And they're asking, and that hasn't happened. So I appreciate what you're saying. I'm not right. I hear you. Like it, and again, I think this is for your purposes. Like, yep, nope. State said this is all
So
set.
one of the other things about Massachusetts is they take it for what it's worth when you say, so that's how Massachusetts is.
I understand, right? And so no, but that has brought national spotlights to other states that do that same type of thing. It's affirmation, right? It's personal affirmation as opposed to some type of documentation. And so I'm aware of it, you know what I mean? And again, this is not a reflection of this board or the clerk's office, or this is the lot we've been dealt, that comes from Boston. So I agree with you completely. Okay.
so,
Yes.
so there isn't any proof that,
The state makes a copy and it's held on their end.
okay,
So I don't have a copy of the birth certificate
Okay.
or the passport, but when you're registered with the motor vehicles, a young child getting their learner's
Yeah.
permit, they do register them.
Yeah.
And they have to provide that.
they do, yeah. So,
And they also check the box that says that they are a U.S. resident is number one on the voter registration card.
Yeah.
And I pointed out to everybody, one, because it kind of blends into the header because it's a half a sheet, but I always point that out. And I do not accept the document unless it's completely filled out.
yeah, so there are checks and balances, I guess.
Yes.
That's the point.
And my point is, nationally, these checks and balances that the clerk just spoke of have been at some points gotten around. This is just for us to be aware. Like, I think this is our job to be aware of these
Sure.
things. It's,
Yeah.
and again, this isn't a
Yep, and
right. So it's just
asking
yes.
the
What are we
question of
doing?
how
What
you
does
do
the state
that,
do?
you
Right.
know?
Right.
So when the state receives that,
Yeah.
it goes into a portal and it comes to us. And let's just say you live on Main Street, but you put Main Road in. It isn't automatically accepted. We have to research that and make sure that it's correct. Or let's just say your name is Amy Marie Smith, and I had no space between Amy and Marie. Is Marie my middle name? is my name Amy Marie? So there's research that's done on each individual one, and we can look in the system to see if maybe you're already registered. And so you look under Smith and you look under A, and you try to make sure that you're doing your due diligence of it. So it doesn't automatically go in. We have to accept them. And if there's a duplicate, let's say I lived in Holden and I moved to Grafton, I would be removed from Holden when I was accepted into Grafton. There are some checks and balances, and even the paperwork. It's, I look over it. Each line. It's important to me that it's done appropriately. And if someone says, if I call them and say your application was incomplete, you didn't put your party, and they say, can you put me on enrolled? I will not do that. They signed that card. They need to complete it.
Yeah, and that's good to hear,
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
yeah. So, thank you.
With regards to that, I lost my train of thought. Inactive for 2 biennial elections before they get removed. That's in here as well too, right? And
I'll
so-
take care of that when I do the confirmation
Yep.
mailing. Yeah.
So that's a 4-year period. Am I right about that? Right. So, let's see. Okay. Anything further on 950-57? Oh, hang on. I got one more thing. Going now to 5705. Registrars may correct information supplied by the applicant to the extent necessary to maintain the integrity of their records. I think you just touched on that, Madam Clerk.
Okay.
Right? This is like, yep. We had duplicates. I realized that can happen.
It does happen. It happens
no.
even when you have a good list, and I want you to know I am working on it. The list before I came was somebody else's. This list is mine, and I'm going to own it.
Okay.
I pulled an extract. I'm working through it. Sometimes there's twins. Sometimes there's the hyphenated name.
Yep.
I'm working through each one. I want you to know that.
Thank you.
And it's changing daily because the more and more census forms we update. And so I just want you to know that I will do my best to keep that as clean as possible. It's important to me, and I will take care of it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things if we talk about this new system that comes in, that I would love to, and you and I talked about this too, about, I don't have to touch anything in there. I could just, if I was in the office and I was going through and I was like, okay, here's a dupe, I could come and get you and say, hey, you could be doing your other duties, and it'd be like, okay, I see, yes, that is correct. Let's remove that duplicate so that ballots
I
don't
don't
get
work
sent out.
on the system when I do that. I work on the extract, which I said I would provide for you.
Yeah, and, but
And
either
that's
way.
how I do it.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. I did, so the various state agencies, Medicaid 2, Health Insurance Connector, so those are some of the ones that submit names. And so then,
And I can reject them. If they are incomplete, I can reject them,
Yeah.
just so you know. I can reject them. If there is a misspelling in the name and we already had them in the system, they are flagged for me for multiple reasons.
Sure.
They can be rejected.
So what do you do when they're rejected?
You can send them back to them.
Okay.
And so I usually send a letter and say that your application was rejected, and then I'll send them a paper form, and it's usually prepaid because I want to make it as easy as possible for the voter.
Okay.
I mean, you don't want to reject anybody, but if you don't have the appropriate information, you definitely don't want to be the one to accept it.
Right. That's good.
I know that there's a 6-month rule, right? So if I move from A to B, typically there's a 6-month period where I can still vote in A if I go to B. Do you know if that's true for a local election?
It's not for the local.
Okay, so locals are automatic. If they move, they don't have the ability. So I leave Grafton, I go to Westboro, and I should be immediately, I realize something's got to trigger you knowing that I went there, whether I come into the office or whether Westboro sends you a notification that says I've registered in Westboro. But with regards to the local election, I can't vote vote as a Westboro, right? It's
couldn't.
Once I've moved.
No.
Understood. Right. So that kind of creates a little bit of a window there with that, but
Well,
Isn't
it's
there
a little bit on the voter too. I mean,
Yes,
you have to,
yep.
and I mean, I don't know that if you moved, I
know
won't
that,
pull
right.
the,
No, right.
so.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of
But
the
also,
system,
that's
but-
also in the eyes of the state of Massachusetts.
Right.
So
I was just curious about, I knew that 6 month, it's just like I would have been allowed to, I could come back to the Grafton polls and go, as long as I didn't register in Westboro, I could have come back to Grafton and said, oh yeah, I live in Westboro, but it's within 6 months. But that's not for the local. I was just, right.
Well, it's based on the honor system too. I can move
Right.
to Westboro and still come back and vote in a Grafton local election if I haven't told anybody
Right.
that I've moved and I haven't registered to vote in my
Right.
new town, so.
Right.
But also, like,
Really
if
good.
someone were here locally to know that, they could challenge your vote. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a system in place for that too.
Probably, I'd be curious how many, we could ask the poll workers, but I'd be curious how many challenges have occurred in Grafton in the last 5 years. I'm
A
guessing.
Probably
mail-in
close
ballot,
to
if
zero.
you mailed in your local ballot, then you wouldn't know anyway.
Right.
Right.
And again, we're not trying to just, look, the system has
But
issues.
just
it's
so you know, like, let's say you did mail it in, but then you were removed before that the votes were tabulated, it wouldn't be counted. It's pulled out.
Yep.
So,
Great. Okay, any further questions on, what was that one? Let's see, I don't think I have any further on 950-57. I know one question I had in 58, so it talks about the number of voters sent confirmation mailings pursuant to 5137 and the number of responses received. So I think we're talking about after June 1st, the clerk sends out a confirmation notice that they haven't responded. And this says, in the number of received, do we keep track of that? That wouldn't be a VRS file, but is that a public record?
well, that would be an extract that I
Oh, it
would
would be.
supply to the mass mailers because they would need to know who is on that list. So, yes, it would be a public record.
Okay, mandatory notices, number sent, number received. So yeah, okay, that's great.
So we
Yep.
don't, we would know how many we sent, but we don't check off when we receive the card. And the cards go out a little bit different than the census. So say you're a family of 4, you would receive 1 census. But the confirmation mailing, if you're all voters, then you would receive
Individual.
individual cards.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I see that. Thank you for making that distinction. And this one also talks a little bit about upon receipt of duplicate registration, the registrar shall check the voter status. If the voter is inactive, he should be restored to the active system. If the voter is active, the registrar shall reject the record. We're just talking about dupes. We've talked about dupes before. I'm not going to get into it. It's just that opens the door for someone to get a ballot that they shouldn't receive. Okay, so that's agenda item 4. Any further conversation or discussion on that one? What we just went through, all those laws. Thank you, Madam Clerk. That was educational.
Thank you.
Discuss Grafton Town Bylaw, Section, Article 10, Section 2, and vote to request Town Council provide a written opinion regarding questions of the laws related to the board. So this comes right back to, I looked into it to see, as a board, if we could, so the policy apparently from the Town Administrator's Office is, so we have, so this came up, and I'm not saying this is what we need to do, or, I'll go through the state with some of my questions, but certainly if this board had a question, can boards and committees utilize town council? Yes, right? It says town council shall, when required by several town officers, boards and committees, furnish a written opinion on a legal question submitted in regard to any matter which concerns the town or them as town officers, and shall at times furnish legal advice to any officer of the town who may require the opinion of town council upon any subject with reference to the duties incumbent upon such officer by virtue of the office, which would be us, the duties incumbent upon us. It doesn't say it in here, but in checking with the town administrator's office, their policy / practice, which again I'm not a fan of, but requests must be reviewed and approved by the TA prior to contact of the town attorney. So any questions we would have if we decided to seek town council on any of the stuff that we've talked about with regards to the laws, a legal opinion, would have to get it approved by the town administrator's office. It's out there. I'm not saying we'll do it. I'm happy to go through the state elections, certainly with 54-12, although it would have been good if they would have utilized perhaps, but that didn't happen. So just so everybody knows, we, as a board, we can utilize town council. Any further discussion or questions on that one?
No.
Okay. Discuss use of registrar signature stamps and request initialing of stamped documents by town clerk staff. So we did have a meeting where we authorized stamps, the use of our stamp. It was,
I have it actually.
yep, so
It
two
was
and a half
in July.
year and a
Yep,
half
of
old, Madam Clerk.
2022. Yep.
Do you have any thoughts, putting your town clerk hat on, as far as frequency of upping that? I think from where
It's
you
not
came
necessary.
from. Okay.
Yep.
I know in Southborough, I believe, and I caught it from your town clerk where you came from. It's like he did it every year. I think every year he would make sure that was addressed.
Oh, so we
But-
could implement that policy, but I did confirm that this is authorized to the office, not to me specifically.
Understood. So if the board's comfortable, we have talked in the past about our stamp being used certainly, and whether we felt as though, and again, to your point, it gets in the town clerk's way, and this has been the way it's been. It gets in their way when they have to, the stamp thing is here they are, yep, bang. We've pretty much authorized the use of it, as opposed to clogging up the wheels where the clerk's calling us going, hey, you need to come down here and sign this. I understand, right? I understand that part of it.
Sure.
The question starts to become, though, so who's doing the checking, right? And so we have a lot of processes that documents get certified. One of them would be whether it's petitions, citizens petitions, whether it's candidates running for elective office in the town, right? And so one of the things I noticed in some of the stuff that has come through is I don't know who's certifying those signatures.
It's
From
Mike
your
or
office.
myself.
Understood. So how would you feel? So personally, do you understand what I'm saying? So it's like I saw it. I see them out. There's a check mark there. I have some of the documents. It's like on the back, it's our stamp.
Yeah.
But I don't know who. I'd almost it's like who did this work. I don't know who did the work.
We can start initialing it.
I would love
Ooh,
that.
So if
Yeah.
it's Mike or myself, we can implement that policy.
I would love that. John, you know what I'm saying? So it's just like, so we would
Yeah.
know, because it's our names on the back of it, we would know who actually did that check. And so there'd just be a little initial of who did it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's
Because
That's
it wasn't
not
us.
a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, it's not
You know
a
what I mean?
problem.
Basically, who used our stamp.
Right.
Right.
Right. And for what purpose?
Well, you'll know what purpose because it's on the actual document.
Yeah.
But you'll know who actually did it. So if there was
Yeah.
ever a question as to, well, who really authorized this, you'll know, AB did really
Yeah.
on our behalf.
Well, I
Right,
assume
so-
it all rests with you anyway.
I think it does. Buck
does,
stops
yeah.
with me, but
Here it is.
I will
I
ask
don't know who did these.
Mike to.
You know what I mean? I
Do-
don't know who did these.
Okay.
On the back, there's all our stamps.
So it's only you and Todd then, not
Mike.
Mike as well?
Todd. Yep.
You know what I mean? So they're stamped.
Never seen the stamps. So.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
You weren't here, so I get that part. Would there be some expectation? You only need 3 signatures, I think,
You
right?
do.
Only 3 registrars. Would there be some expectation that you will be stamping as we move forward?
Yes.
Okay, understood. One of the other questions that came up, I know, can a registrar certify his own signature? Again, I don't know if that's the case, but
I don't.
okay.
It's just
No,
a
No
bad
worries,
look.
but-
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, you can certify your own, or you can sign your own, paper, but to certify it, I feel like,
Okay.
Yeah,
even if
take
that's
it
not a
outside.
policy, it should be.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can talk about that later too. I would like to see it. Let's see, requiring to initial. Okay, so we'll try to
I'll
institute
talk
that.
to
Will
them
that be good?
today. Yep.
Okay, great. That's perfect. Okay, any further discussion on number 6? I'm sorry. Yep. Any further discussion on stamp request of initialing documents by town clerk staff?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
Item 7, discuss creation of written policy regarding election or appointments by the Board of Registrars. So I think we've kind of covered that one already.
We did.
You know what I mean? And so we're going to wait for some legal opinion and maybe just
Yeah.
think about it. You know what I mean? I'm not in a rush, or I don't think this board is in a rush, especially if once we hear. So I think we'll hear on Friday whether there's been names put. Oh no, I'm wrong about that. I'm wrong about that. So we'll wait and see. I don't. The deadline would be June 1st
Right.
for town committees to submit names. It's so right. So we won't know. So just think it through.
Yeah. I mean, I can certainly bring it forward to my town committee because I don't think they've been alerted to that.
Okay.
But is there a way to institute a letter?
Yeah, I'm gonna check and see if it's been sent, and then once I confirm that, I'm
Yeah.
sure that we'll be able to move that process forward.
Have your chair look last year.
I will check.
Have your chair
Yeah.
look and see last year. I'm sure there's a letter there, and it's just going to be basically the same thing.
Yeah.
It would be, I'm the chair of the Democratic Town Committee. I would like to forward these names for appointment as election officers. Is really would be the official term, but they would have got a letter in the past, John. I'm pretty sure I saw last year's letters that went out. So I mean, all it would just simply be.
They might have gone out. I might
Yeah.
not know about it.
It doesn't.
So
That's a two-way street, right? They can
Do you
either.
have any idea, Easter, if they didn't,
If they've received, if they've
Yeah.
gone out yet?
if
I
they've
don't-
received any kind of notification?
Yeah, I'm not aware of them receiving any.
It's a two-way street, though. They can initiate it,
Mhm.
or they can, if they want to wait, they can
Yeah.
wait, but they can initiate it too.
Yeah.
They don't have to wait
Yeah,
as long as it's before June 1st.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If
Yep.
if they know to do that, that's
Yes.
fine.
No, it's
Yeah.
true, right? Right.
Yeah.
It is true.
Yeah, so I will, I'm gonna,
Right. That's
I'm gonna call
That's the
them,
job your chair,
Right.
needs to.
Make sure that,
Agreed. Okay, I completely agree. Okay. So I think we've. Yep. So.
Chair?
Yes, sir. Mr. Jefferson, come on up.
Thank you. Andy Jefferson, member of the select board, but just speaking on behalf of myself.
Address? Sorry.
31 Weston Street.
Thanks.
Just wanted to clarify for everybody, the board of registrar, the list for possible registrars have already been sent. Both requests are sent via certified mail. The request for election workers will be made at our April 1st meeting. We will authorize the clerk to send those letters out in advance of the April 15th deadline. So just so you know.
Okay. Thank
oh,
you.
thank you.
thank you.
I had a further question for you, though. I know that it was put on the agenda, but is it someone's belief that you have the authority to, you know what I mean? That's a select board authority based on law. I don't believe it has to be an item on your agenda, but it's good that you did it, right? People can see it. I assume that's why you did it, but I was like, okay. And I think that was it. You could have just, much like the board must do, select board I'm sure does all sorts of things that don't necessarily go as a vote at your meeting. I could be wrong about that, but either way, doesn't matter.
Tough for me to come up with anything without
Gotcha.
an example. Typically, it's discussed as a group and then, consensus. I wouldn't expect anybody to object to the letter being sent out. It's more procedural, but yes.
Right. Yeah, it just struck me odd is because this year was the first year that the other thing came up. Yet, even though I think in the past that letter has been sent out, certainly the registrar letter by the clerk and the board, I think duplicate letters, it just caught me as odd that they were. But I guess the town is appreciative that the select board puts it on their agenda and everyone can see, yep, these letters are going out. Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Where are we? 7 we went through. Discuss process for registrar, discuss of various extracts. We already did that.
Yep.
Right? So everyone, the board understands that, we submit them and our town clerk, i.e. our fellow registrar, is going to see that we get them. Discuss production of past minutes. So those are still hanging out there, Madam Clerk. I hate to put it on you. We talked about the law. I can certainly try to give you everything we have. I think Mike has everything we have with regards to the production of the minutes from those 2 meetings.
So you think he has the minutes, or you need me to?
He doesn't
bring out
have.
from-
I know he doesn't. I don't think he has the minutes. I think he has the information to create the minutes.
Okay.
And they just haven't been created. So if you want to touch base on them, that 114 meeting that was televised and recorded. So
Okay.
that will be available for that part.
Okay.
And obviously the minutes of today's meeting, we'll have on our next agenda for when we get ready to talk about that one. Okay, any other further discussion on production of minutes?
None.
Okay, I think we've, oh boy.
What time is
We did
that?
pretty good. It's 10:18, 10:19 now.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so having no further business, I declare this meeting adjourned.